Welcome everyone to YourDesk University, bringing you live learning with AEC Tech experts directly to your desk. My name is Tim and Hazel, and I'm a senior technical designer at Walter P. Moore. YourDesk University is an initiative intended to help the AEC Tech community connect and share knowledge during these challenging times. You can tune in here 2 to 3 times per week for focused presentations with live Q&A. Take this opportunity to broaden your understanding of the digital revolution that is overcoming our industry, or to learn a new skill from these AEC Tech experts. We are a growing team of passionate tech enthusiasts and meetup groups. The open source community has given so much to our industry, and in return, we give you this, a high quality training opportunity right from your desk. And it's all free. If you're tuning in live, don't forget to use the chat on the right side. Yesterday, we had so many great conversations from there. Ask your questions, and I'll try to get to them during the show or at the end. So tonight, we have a special treat. We're excited to participate in spreading the news and gathering a few people from action of the making community. These are individuals who are providing a necessary link in our emergency supply chain. This is obviously very relevant right now while we have COVID crisis going on. I also think this is pertinent to potential future crises in understanding solutions these experts have created to solve relevant issues in adjusting supply chain, design validation, and best methods for distribution. We have 2 panelists joining us, both from different regions of the United States, each with a unique background and work environment. I do want to preface this show by stating we are not medical experts, nor are we experts in medical equipment. This is an open discussion between makers. Views and statements are the best knowledge at the time of the recording. Obviously, with such a fluid and changing topic, the views of the panelists may change at any moment. We don't claim to represent the entire industry or all viewpoints. And with that, I want to introduce Olivia Morgan. Olivia is the founder of Model Space LLC, a commercial architectural model making and fabrication company that has transitioned their entire operation from creating building custom physical models to creating PPE. Olivia, can you share a few things about your story? How did you get to this point? Did you always intend on making 3D PPE?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say, of course not. Like most AEC support firms during this time period, our work has been put on pause. Usually we're making architectural models, but for the moment, as that work has been paused, I thought the best use of our equipment would be to make this PPE equipment. And the main way that I initially got involved was through the maker community. I also have a background in product design through the local maker community in the Nova and DC area, and they were the first group to kind of pull me in and show me what others are doing. And because we have a more built out shop to create some of this stuff, we can do small scale manufacturing of some of this work. And I've learned a lot throughout this process, even though it's just been a 2-week period. And in that time period, we were initially just talking to individual hospitals, and now we've moved over all of our donations through a nonprofit, the Medical Society of Northern Virginia. And we've done some rapid prototyping for them to figure out what are the best products to get to them during this time period. But it's been such like a tight time frame to do prototyping, much tighter than I'm used to with like clients or other types of normal timelines or projects. So
Thanks. Our second panelist is Nick Jacobson. Nick is an architect, founder of Mixed Surgical Technologies, and a clinical designer at CU Anschutz Medical Campus in Denver, Colorado. Currently a core organizer of Make for COVID, providing thousands of pieces of PPE to hospitals across Colorado. And I think I even heard today that they delivered some to New York this week as well. Nick, can you share a few things about your story? How did you get to this point?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you inviting me to come talk today. It's been a pretty chaotic past couple of weeks, so it's nice to reflect for a moment. I got into all of this by accident. As an architect, I started to see that the tools that I was using became a lot more useful and applicable to the medical profession. around the time of graduate school. One of my classmates was looking into medical, using the technology that we use as architects to look at surgery and medicine. And when I moved to Denver, there was a need for it. And it sort of took off as a hobby, but it became very, I learned early on, it became a very powerful tool to take all of what I had known in architecture and all of our tools for 3D and analysis and apply it to the medical profession. So what's happened over the last couple of years is that the profession has adopted 3D technologies in a huge way. And when I first started, this wasn't the case. In fact, a lot of the surgeons that I talked to were offended by the idea that a designer could come in and help when they had done 10,000 surgeries. But slowly over time, the technology got better and it's become adopted. And so that's really showing the power right now during this crisis, because about 2-3 weeks ago when this started, the maker community instantly got involved, and my phone blew up by all of the doctors and surgeons I worked with sending me ideas that they had seen online that their colleagues all over the world were already using. Ventilator splitters, masks and shields and things like that. And so they were the ones sending me these ideas. And at the same time, this group of organizers here at the university, I'm part of a group called InWorks, partnered with some members of the community to try to form a group that could make something bigger than just the university. And since that time, I believe we have something like 1,500 volunteers, hundreds of companies who have changed over their manufacturing system to be able to help. And then my work specifically is interfacing with the doctors to get these designs into the hospital from day one and get their user feedback, go into the OR, see how they're using this, and allowing us to iterate and get something that's meaningful out faster.
Yeah, you guys are both really on the front lines. It's slightly in different ways, but definitely on the front lines. I remember when I started putting together this panel and I was thinking about our audience and thinking about how they are fascinated about 3D printing and technology. And I was thinking, oh, we're going to have this really great conversation around masks and about face shields. And we'll talk a little bit about how do you actually print these things? And then I started realizing there's actually like a much larger conversation to be had about our supply chain, about all the different issues that are happening right now, about design validation. And so, yeah, thank you so much. For those who saw some of our advertisement, you also saw a third panelist. Sadly, Bernardo Schumacher from Big not able to join us tonight, but I think that we have two great perspectives here. So we're going to focus the conversation in three major areas. One is on design. So we will talk for a little bit about the actual designs, the different face shields that exist in the market right now. We're seeing a lot of things going across LinkedIn, across Twitter. The second, we'll talk about validation of work. How do we know that what's being done is the best, the most appropriate providing? And then third, we're going to talk a little bit about the supply chains and distribution. I think as designers, we really did all go to college because we wanted to help provide answers to necessary needs people were solving. And I think that that's where I see you guys doing this, and that's really cool. So to start off with the design area, and for those who have questions, please post them. We'll get to them. Let's focus firstly on this idea of design. So how do you guys determine what specific pieces to work on, what design to use? Can you speak to that? Maybe Olivia, you can start.
Sure. So I'm glad you said up at the top that we're not medical experts, but the best way to design things for medicine is to get feedback directly from the source and hear what they need. I think my first introduction to the type of open source PPE on the internet was mostly designs done by makerspaces, or I think the most popular one, or maybe not anymore, but the most popular one is the Prusa version, which I have printed out here, which is now, it seems like everywhere. This seems like the open source main visor that we're creating. And as a designer for production, I have no problems with this, but there are a few issues for the medical community that need to be addressed with some of these designs. So this seems to be the most prevalent on the market, but after getting feedback from those who I'm working with in the medical society, there are kind of a few key issues. The most important of which is the opening on the top of this design. But that's been the process with most of these things. We're getting, or at least I am, pulling things that are open source from off the internet as like a baseline, getting feedback from the medical experts on what they need, what could be improved about this, and then trying to prototype those as quickly as possible. What's tough in these situations is because the time frame for needing these products is so short, there's not a lot of time to iterate and make the best product for the medical community. And that means that sometimes you just can't address every issue with the products that come out. Initially we didn't want to use these visors as donation, but because so many of them are already printed out and we need face shields immediately, along with a few other, or obviously a ton of other PPE, they were willing to use these in place of the redesign that we made, which I think you might have linked below in the YouTube description. But that's kind of been our process. It's been a kind of feedback between the professionals, but there's only so much we can do. You have to take a point and say, we got to stop here and we have to start pushing these out as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And I know, Nick, when we were talking about this, you were talking to me a little bit about how sometimes different hospitals want different designs. What have you learned about that over the last, I don't know, I want to say 2 months, but in some ways
feels
it's
like it.
kind of been just a couple of weeks, or I don't know how long you've been involved in this.
Yeah, I don't even know what day it is, really. What have we learned about that? Well, initially we printed and tested out all of the designs that we had seen that were out there. And thankfully in my work, I work with, I think, over 30 different disciplines, from craniofacial work to cardiothoracic, to epilepsy, to trauma, to pediatric trauma. They all had slightly different requirements, which was not to be to be expected, but slightly frustrating because you bring them in and one person says the little gap in that Prusa shield is not a problem for us, and we go, great, because we can now print much faster. We can get 30% more out a day to you. And then we started to go into the ERs and trauma, and they said, actually, we do need that covered. And so trying to understand, trying to make those changes started to become, at first, simple. But then there's little nuances of how these are being used. An anesthesiologist wears this very differently than a trauma surgeon. And in fact, I've got this photo of a trauma surgeon who took the Prusa headband and flipped it upside down. And I love this. She's one of our firecracker surgeons that we work with, who's brimming with ideas all the time. Those are the people that I typically work with, the ones who are very creative and scrappy. And she took the design and flipped it upside down and put the headband on her chest and said, see, this is much better because I can move my head from side to side. And in the 10 people I had talked to beforehand, nobody had said that. And it made a ton of sense. So really, it was getting in there early on and often. And now the headbands are kind of running themselves. We've got a number of different designs. We know when a department calls what to give them and what they want. And pretty much we've dialed in the percentages that our teams are making to be able to optimize the most amount of shields that we can get out. It's a work in progress. Everything changes every day, which is fun, but it's been like a 3-week-long charrette.
Yeah. I think when I was talking to you, I forgot for a moment that you were an architect, or maybe are an architect, and that you that now this is how you practice. When I was when I was listening to different people and listening to different types of designs, I started realizing that really it's an optimization problem with different variables that we're optimizing for. One person might be trying to optimize for comfort. Another person might be optimizing for print speed. Can you guys speak at all about kind of the input parameters that you think about when you think about this kind of an optimization problem?
I need to take a second when I think about that.
Yeah, I hear a lot of different things. I hear a lot of people asking for a lot of different things. I've got this anesthesiologist named Dr. James Thomas, and he's great. But he's asking for the ability to be able to flip up his mask, which is a much harder design problem. And I want to be able to do it for him. But he's the only one that's asked for it out of the, I don't know, 10,000 that we've delivered so far. I want to be able to get him one. But since, we kind of I work on a kind of a democratic basis, and the more people that ask for something, the more likely we are to give it to them. So it's more of a ask. But there are teams like the surgeons will wear their scrub caps or bouffants over their head, and so they don't complain at all about the headband digging into their forehead. But yet the ICU teams don't, and so we've had to provide little pads to be able to support them because they're wearing these for 12 hours a day, and they don't love that diamond pattern dug into their skin. Weight is a huge issue. Some of these teams, some of these people will be wearing these for 12 hours, and headache is a real big problem. Like you would think that protecting people is the first one, but actually protecting them and comfort are kind of right there, because they need to be able to do their job, and this shouldn't give them a headache, or we want them to be performing at their best.
So when you guys work with these different designs, Olivia, you talked about improving a design. Nick, you've talked multiple times about different designs. So you take a design that you find or hear about or create. Is there like what does the process look like from going from that idea, maybe improving, and then having something that the medical community can actually use and is valuable to them?
Mm.
I think I initially had a problem answering your question because this was such a condensed time period for iteration. So I was trying to think, how many iterations did we do? I think that this process has been so condensed that I've only been able to make 3 prototypes of one type of 3D printed head visor. And the biggest issues that we were dealing with, a lot of the issues were already solved by the open source one. So it's good to like take what is already online and then, tweak it and alter it to fit our specific needs. And, the design we made for the medical society, like I said, like Nick mentioned, I don't know if this is going to be an acceptable design for every department or every hospital. And it's interesting to hear about how all of these other people in the medical community are making their own tweaks to it. We say we are the designers, but it's also the people using these products that are changing them and adding design pieces. And then we pull from that. But because this is so condensed, we have, like I said, we have to stop at one point and just like push out so many. And then hopefully from there, from that first push, we can take a step back if there's ever a chance and like change it from there.
Our process for iterating, getting out product right now is rapidly changing. The face shields are the low-hanging fruit of this whole process. And the whole idea, we started with the face shields because there was zero liability. They're not considered a medical device. So we can hand them out all day long, and my 1,500 volunteers are not going to, they're covered. They're going to be okay. The 500 ladies who are sewing are not going to get sued by this. We have taken this through testing, and that takes time. But I started coming in the back door and handing these out, and then they made their way up to the command center. And every hospital, most of the hospitals I work with now have a command center that is evaluating what's coming in, making decisions, and they've got PPE experts, and they've got all the experts all in one room. So this made it into the command center, and they approved it. We've been providing them testing as we can. And again, this was low-hanging fruit. Now, the hard part is the elements that are considered medical devices. So a face mask is a medical device. It's a pretty simple design problem. It's a very difficult legal problem.
The face masks themselves are?
The face masks themselves. Actually a harder design problem than you would think, because they're using them in ways I didn't expect. But what's happening right now is we're in this kind of legal gumbo, so to speak, where the US government has the ability to declare an emergency use act, which would allow people to use whatever they wanted. Now, it sounds like a great idea because now we can give them face masks. And we've got hospitals who are about to run out of PPE within the next 10 days. But the government hasn't enacted that. Hospitals have the ability to enact a relaxed standard of care, but that's on a hospital by hospital basis. And typically a medical device needs to go through a very long process of FDA approvals, NIOSH testing, so on and so forth, that can take, on a good day, months. And now with the influx of things, it's taking weeks. We don't have weeks. But we do have a product that works. So what do we do with that? It's a very hard problem. And what we're having to do is, the only way we have found to get around this and protect everybody, make sure it's safe, is to take them on a hospital by hospital basis up the chain of command and get our products on the CEO's desk. And they're the ones we give them all the information, and they're the ones making the decision whether or not to go, which absolves us of liability, but it doesn't absolve them. So as a designer, we've got a product, we're ready to go. But it's really the legal side that is difficult. However, I think that there's some ways around. Now, if we go with the Emergency Use Act, as I was talking about, which sounds great, you could use anything you want.
But that introduces its own problems, right?
It does, because all of a sudden then the state gets involved, and everything has to go through the state, and they're the ones mandating what goes where. That process can be really slow. This all came about because in Colorado, the state ordered 2 million masks from China. And they arrived and they didn't pass the test. They weren't good at all. The CEO of one of the hospitals here said it'd be better off if you use toilet paper. And now the shipments are being stopped at the border. So they're not good. They wouldn't protect you in this case. However, with an Emergency Use Act, hospitals can say, yeah, go ahead, use it. That's all we have to give. That's all we have to give you. We don't have to give you anything. So it comes, there's pros and cons to it.
Yeah. We have an interesting question over here in the chat that I want to get to. There's actually two. They take us a little bit away from this conversation about insurance, about liability, about this side of things, but kind of getting back into the design for just a moment. The first is, and I'm going to ask it exactly as it's asked because I think you guys can be the right ones to answer this question, but how are you printing clear face shields? Obviously, you're talking about 3D printing things. And I don't think this is a stupid question. I think it's a good, legitimate question. And then also, when you answer that, can you talk about those bands and why some of them are at different heights?
Well, I'll start off with the easy one. We're not 3D printing the clear visor portion of the shield. It's actually, well, there's a few different options for this, but most of them that I've seen and the ones that we're making are laser cut PETG shields. But there's also these interesting versions I've seen online that are compatible with 3-ring or 4-ring binder dividers, which once again, not a medical expert, but I don't think those are ideal for medical use because of how flimsy they are. But once again, not my place. We have the capacity to laser cut and make a better product. So, we do. This is, I think, more for those who don't have a laser cutter.
And then could someone speak to the height of the objects and why they vary?
Nick, maybe you can be a better person.
Yeah, that's a good question. There were some that came out really early that were super thin, but they broke instantly. So I think that those were early designs. The one we're using now is about, I don't know, half an inch. We've got a couple that are a little bit taller. And the reason why is that you can flip the headband, and you can have a longer or shorter visor based upon your needs. So that size is meant to be durable. The hospitals that I'm working with are giving one to every person and saying, this is your mask for the duration. And so, they're going to war, and this is their helmet. So it needs to be durable. And we're constantly reevaluating that.
Yeah, I think this gets us a little bit into the supply chain conversation, but Olivia, can you talk about how you're working with other people because the 3D printing takes so long, and then how you're sourcing the you call it PEX? Is that what the
PETG.
PETG?
I mean, either way, I call it PETG to kind of shorten it. But yeah, so to talk a little bit about the supply chain process, I think when we initially spoke, we were talking about maybe making this more a tutorial about how you can get involved and make your own shield. And
Little
then
did we know there was a much more important conversation to be had.
We're expounding upon that in really crazy, interesting ways. But I had a conversation with you just after that saying, we can't find any of this material anymore. It's getting bought up. I've never seen anything like this before, where the material that we're using for the visors, I've contacted 10 different plastic providers, and they say the manufacturers will not have any more in until the end of April. And I have to, I'm not angry or disappointed, because I know that people are buying those up to use for this purpose. So it's just going to probably a different source. And, the GMs and the Fords of the world who are producing thousands upon thousands of these are, shipping them out, hopefully, to the right people, right? So we're dealing with some of those issues. I've been lucky enough to have a big enough network of fabricators that they have some stockpiles, so we can still continue producing these during this period where we can't pull on any of our normal plastic providers. I mean, if anyone in the comments below, if you can find another provider of PETG, please contact me. We have some more coming in next week, but I've never seen such a crazy need for this. It used to be $15 for a 4x8 sheet. Now it's gone up in some places to $60, which is just like, I've never seen a product like expand that much in price. And on the 3D printing side, you're right, it takes a long time to print these products sometimes, which is why our response has been to partner with larger firms. We're actually, with the Medical Society, partnering with Northrop Grumman, and they have like just an army of 3D printers at their disposal. And we're also trying to partner up with other architecture firms, even one 3D printer. Like if someone wants to get involved and give us the shields, like we'll finish the process. So it's really been a community effort, and it's been wonderful to help people get involved, even if they don't have all of the pieces to do that.
Yeah.
And we've also, as a side note, even tried to develop a fully laser cuttable version that kind of meets those needs. There's a few issues with this one, but we're kind of focusing more towards the 3D printed one just because there's less variability in the quality.
Yeah. Nick, you've talked about bringing so many people together. I think that's maybe, I don't know what Make for COVID exactly is, but it sounds like a collaborative effort to try to make the things that are needed jointly. Can you speak a little bit about that? And then also on the design side, you talked about printing the masks, or the face shield, the mask. Is it the mask that covers the mask? But the designs I've seen are like really large, and it seems like that would take a day or two to print. Can you speak to either one of those questions?
Sure. I'll start with the last one first. We've evaluated a number of 3D printed components. They're good, but they're not great. And in fact, none of them have really passed any of the qualitative fit tests that we put them through. So we have it in our back pocket, but we also have been working on design that's based in silicone, and it's much more expensive, unfortunately, but it's much more comfortable and it works. And it's passed all of the tests. Silicone, if any of you know about that, basically nobody casts in silicone in the United States because of the requirements. So getting somebody who does that has been tough, and we've looked at alternatives. Also because material is evaporating. We've had to pivot every day, one piece of equipment, today it's the band in the back, the little piece of elastic that connects the headbands. What do? We use rubber bands. We're trying to get people to sew. Like, that's run out. So right now,
You're saying your alternative option is running out as you're figuring out each of these pieces. Sometimes,
yeah,
you're
absolutely.
pivoting off of yesterday's pivot.
Yes, and then all of a sudden, maybe the first one comes back online. So it's difficult to chase these things down. Now, so we're working right now on a silicone-based one. We have a couple companies in the country who are willing to do it. It's not typically what they do. There's a company that makes mannequins, and they cast in they have 55-gallon drums of silicone. So this is making some interesting partnerships, which gets to the first question, which I'm answering second.
Yeah.
Managing all these people. This scaled really big, really fast. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it's become logistically difficult to do that. So with the Make for COVID group, there's a lot of people that spend all day talking to lawyers and just getting the business side, put together. Thankfully, that's I've been able to, Thankfully, I've been in the hospital by the COVID wards, which tells you how much I love that side. But organizing people, we have people that are coming into the hospitals, coming in the front door, and oh my goodness, Jesus. People that are coming into the front doors, handing the hospital, prototypes and saying, "Hey, can I help? Can I get involved?" And thankfully, we have become the trusted source that they send everybody to. We get them involved. We've got a really good process to be able to organize them, to manufacture, have standards. But that's early on we were getting a lot of pieces that weren't good. We had to identify those sources. So it's like starting a business from scratch in 15 days and organizing a good product. But I think we've done that. The community certainly has come together. It's been very exciting. Again, people, knocking down our doors. I've picked up headbands at people's houses right down the street, neighbors who have one. We've got doctors who have got 3D printers in their offices we've sent files to, and they're making them for their team. And then everything up to, say, Lockheed Martin, who, has their aerospace systems, the guys who are running the Orion space capsule program, are now helping us print headbands and working on design. So it's a pretty big community. But I want to say the most difficult part about that when you get big is that you have to make a lot of moral decisions right now. We have a huge responsibility because we can only make so many a day, and a lot of people are asking. And so when one hospital places a huge order, we try to fulfill that. But then another hospital comes on in the middle of nowhere and says, we have 10 people here and we have nothing. So now we have to start to divvy up our supply. And in a way, it's a tremendous responsibility to try to say who gets what. Unfortunately, that's been up to us to make that determination. I hope we're doing it right. I wish we had enough to be able to deal with everybody, but I go to bed every night and stay awake thinking, do we make the right decisions? This is not something I ever expected.
Yeah, that's really hard. And I think that distribution question is one that's going to grow, and it's going to become a bigger and bigger issue, right, in the coming days. I do hope that the supply is somehow able to, in some ways, catch up, because we do see so many. We've seen, see all these different companies, all these different people coming together to try to provide a supply. But then, you hear about a different supply issue that potentially arises. So I don't really know all the people that will watch this, but let's assume for a moment that some of the people may also be organizing large efforts. They might be architects organizing an effort in their city. They might be participating in an effort, or they might be an entrepreneur who's about to shift his entire business to try to help with this. You've talked about scaling and the difficulties that come from that. Could you maybe give a 5-day warning to somebody who might be in that position? Did that come across?
I keep thinking
It's a
about what
hard
I want to
one.
say and then like rethinking how it should go. So initially when we started trying to produce this, I had these like pie in the sky ideas of like what could get done in a certain time period. And, I don't want to discourage anyone from doing it because of all of these challenges. I think the best way to go about it is to first like reach out to your local community. I initially started reaching out to all of my architecture contacts, the big companies that I knew like armies of 3D printers on hand. And, it turns out that like their best use of this technology is probably for their local community where they can like immediately print or fabricate something and get it out to them for their hospital that's, within 10 miles of themselves. And that's kind of been the response I've been getting when I reach out to other people. People, you can get a big group of others to help you if it's for a community effort. It's, a little bit tougher to, pull on those resources if, I'm asking a contact over on the West Coast, for other reasons too, like shipping the materials to us. How do you distribute it? So I think focusing first small to get a handle on, this hospital where I have a contact has an immediate need is a good way to start. And then, there's a potential to build up from there because you have an immediate contact with that hospital or you have an immediate colleague that has a resource and is invested in the community.
Nick, any thoughts on to add on organizing people?
On getting started.
Getting started.
Don't wait.
Yes.
The hospitals are, I would say that from what I have seen, a lot of people are waiting. We started this long before the hospitals said they needed it. And, day one, we brought these things into hospitals and they said, no way, no how are we going down this route.
Mm-hmm.
And then day two, they said, give me a sample. And then day three, they said, please get me as many as you possibly can right now. And so from the inside, I'm hearing things where hospitals are saying, we're going to wait until we have 48 hours left of equipment before we start to go. Guess what? It takes longer than 48 hours to get you anything. So I would say be proactive. Even though hospitals may not be needing them right now, they will. The reports are that industry is not going to come back online to be able to give enough PPE to hospitals to the levels they were at before until June. And then there may be a second wave. We may have this year after year. So hospitals are trying to manage the perception that we have everything's okay, but everything's not okay. I'm getting calls all hours of the night from doctors and surgeons that are saying, I have nothing and I'm going into surgery tomorrow with a COVID positive patient. Please help me, give me something. They're fearful. I mean, I don't want to scare anybody, but this is a group that doesn't scare easily, and they're scared. And when they're scared, I'm scared. So let's not wait. Even if you make a whole bunch and they don't get used, that's okay. And I would also say that the Make for COVID website, everything is open source. One of the great things about this community is that we make things open source for better or worse, but for better in these times. And all of our designs are on there. as they become legally, okay to put on there. And all of the documents that we have created for organization to be able to help people. We're not trying to own any of this. We're trying to protect our doctors. So if you need help with that, please go to the website. And if you have trouble with it, please try to get a hold of me.
Yeah, and we're going to try to add those links to the description in the next couple of minutes. So hopefully those will come through. I hear and I feel this huge call to action, and I see it happening. Like, people are doing it. 3 weeks ago there was one company 3D printing, then there's 4. Then, industrial people are switching the way that they're doing production. All these things are happening. We hear now, a supply chain in some ways is drying up of some of the supplies. Like, how do people get involved in this? I think is a big question. And you talked a little bit about open source designs that exist. So if I have a 3D printer, or my company has a 3D printer, I'm going to guess at this point it's probably in some way involved in that. But we'll post some resources on how people can learn about those designs. But let's say I don't have a 3D printer, and I just want to be involved in this community, and I want to help out at this time. What are some ways, either that you would like to see people, or you have seen people get involved that may not have that kind of equipment, and on top of that, they're being told, stay away from everything where you might be able to help volunteer, right? And I think that there's definitely huge value in social distancing, because that's going to keep the hospitals as much reduced as possible. So how can people be involved? And yeah, so many questions that are kind of rolling around. We're also we're already over our time, and I really appreciate you guys. But we're going to stick with a couple of these last questions. And if you have any more questions, throw them in the comments quickly so we can get to them. And before we wrap up, so kind of back to that question, just to reiterate, how can I be involved if I don't have a 3D printer, but I want to support or assist this group effort?
I know I'm not personally organizing this. The medical society I'm working with is, but I mean, just the assembly of the products takes time as well. There's the 3D printing part, there's the laser cutting part there's the molding part, but like the final assembly of some of these parts can be the most time consuming portion of this whole process. So getting in contact with any local resources that are being a part of this effort, there might be some opportunity to be a part of the fabrication process. Of course, there's also that issue of social distancing. We're trying really hard not to be in the same room at the same time. So like a lot of the work that I'm doing, like I'm doing assembly at home, or we're making sure that if someone's laser cutting, they're the only person in the shop doing that. And then like dividing up materials for final assembly in other parts. And we can only do so much assembly ourselves. And I think a majority of it is going to be like volunteer and community effort. So, I mean, that's a start. There's other ways to get involved other than just producing PPE, which, I don't know if I can speak to, but obviously staying home is the biggest issue, and maybe sometimes the hardest issue for some people to follow. And I just want to say that like staying home, isn't doing nothing. So I don't want people to think that sitting around is not a public service. It's very useful for the medical community.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, stay home. It would be a really bad time to have to go to the hospital right now.
Yes.
The other thing is we have people that are sewing.
Mm-hmm.
We have people who are organizing deliveries. We've got this 4x4 crew that came out of the mountains that have big 4x4s and are picking up equipment from people's houses and delivering them. We have if you are helping the hospitals, we have documents in Colorado. I've got some badges and some documents that say I'm helping with this. Therefore, I'm an essential person moving around. And I would say that I don't always play by the rules, but I would say if you're helping and you're delivering things, that's pretty essential.
Oh,
So
definitely. I mean, yeah, we can't
that,
ask all the doctors to, stay at home. And the
yeah.
same thing for the people who are making these things and delivering and spreading them around to other areas.
Mhm. We also have a lot of SOPs that we have written, standard operating procedure, for people who are sewing. So what they do is, they sew, they've got the gloves on, they have sanitizer, so there's things, and then they put them out on their front porch in a bag, and we sterilize the bag, and then we have somebody else come and pick them up. And so, we're doing our best to try to accommodate everybody that has a need. But there's more needs that are happening every day, from just materials to equipment. So how to get involved? I think that there's a number of groups out there right now. I think my website, the Make for COVID website, not mine, but the Make for COVID website, has links to other people around the country who are doing things. It's probably best to get involved with these right now. Might be the most efficient way.
So I'd like to end on a moment of, I mean, this is serious and this is all real, and I want to pause for a moment. So I'm going to ask this question, then leave a moment to linger, and then I'd love to get your thoughts. But I'd love to end on a moment of kind of hope. Um, so as you look at the things you've seen, as you see the processes, as you see people getting involved, um, what good have you seen out of people, or what hope have you experienced yourself in the way that this is all coming about?
I think just the fact that the response from the design and maker community was as quick as it was pretty remarkable in the context of everything. I mean, just before this started, I was already seeing open source designs floating around, but they didn't really gain traction until quarantining started to happen in a more serious way, and it was just starting to affect people's lives. But just the fact that people were just the people that I talked to who were like designing, this is a collaborative process, and really talented like designers are giving away their time for free for this because it's it's what we can do, and it still might not be enough, but that's not stopping people from doing it. I think what stops a lot of us from trying to help is just the insurmountable image of starting or the issue at whole. And that hasn't stopped so many really talented designers that I've worked with.
Yeah, thank you so much. Nick, any final moments of hope or glimmers of hope
Oh,
you've seen?
oh yeah.
None, right?
There's a
Oh wait,
no. There's a
lots?
None. Oh
ton.
no.
There's a ton. I mean, the biggest part is all the volunteers, the people that are coming out of the
Yeah.
woodwork, especially the sewists, the people that are sewing. They're the most obnoxious volunteers we have because they're just like, how can I help? How can I help? Please. So that's really hopeful to see these people that are turning their businesses around. It's also hopeful to see that um, manufacturing in the United States, design is coming to the rescue. That we can do it. We can have an impact, and we can produce a really great product, and it's really showing right now. And the hopeful, I mean, I have one image. I'm going to try to share my screen to show you this, but this is to me the most hopeful thing. Can you all see my
And it
screen?
looks like it's, yep,
Yep.
there it is.
This is Dr. Gareth Morgan, Children's Hospital here in Colorado, who is wearing one of these shields in the cath lab, and he's being taken care of. So he has a lot less fear of contracting the virus and dying and getting other people sick. That to me is the most hopeful thing, that we're able to do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Do either of you have any closing remarks before we close this session?
Thank you for putting this on. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing the other series as well.
Thank you so much. Stay home.
Yes.
Help if you
Stay
can.
home. I hope everyone's come across
Please,
this, definitely.
please.
Yeah, and thank you so much for putting this on. This is really great. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to everything else.
Thank you for
Good luck.
participating. It's really an honor to have you both here. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye.